Hi, my name is Catherine Polk. Thanks for joining my presentation. This research brief examines the efficacy of emotional messaging on social media for nonprofit fundraising purposes. Since the global financial crisis in 2008, government social services have been downsizing and charitable nonprofits have received decreasing support from the public sector. Recent legislation potentially removing tax credits for charitable giving exacerbates the challenge for nonprofit fundraising professionals. As a result, nonprofits increasingly rely on donations from the private sector. To compensate for the lack of government funding, many charitable nonprofits facilitate emotional fundraising campaigns, which is the most commonly used fundraising model. Emotional storytelling campaigns use narratives to provoke positive or negative emotions from the viewer to elicit desired feedback from individuals for collective action aimed at social change or a social movement. Some researchers suggest lumping all emotion into positive and negative categories oversimplifies the complex and individualized nature of emotional processing. Therefore, communication practitioners working for charitable nonprofits should understand what types of emotional messaging to employ to different demographics for optimized fundraising efforts on social media. The most frequently used form of emotional messaging is digital storytelling. Often in the form of short videos or photos with text, digital storytelling is disseminated on social or digital media over time as episodes to an ongoing story, which demonstrates a nonprofit organization's mission, programs, obstacles, and/or success. Emotional messaging can be challenging for communication practitioners because positive and negative emotions can provoke different reactions from each individual. Moreover, research shows conflicting data about the effectiveness of negative and positive emotional appeals for fundraising purposes. Further complicating this issue, females and males can perceive emotional messaging differently. Consequently, this literature review examines online emotional fundraising research to help fundraisers and communication practitioners working with charitable nonprofit organizations to employ emotional messaging to increase donations among varying demographics. Social media provides an optimal channel for nonprofit communication practitioners to expand their reach and build relationships essential for fundraising. Moreover, social and digital media empowers nonprofits to personalize organization donor relationships through two-way conversations, which also increases trust and balance of power with key stakeholders. Unfortunately, multiple researchers have discovered that many nonprofit communication professionals underutilize social media and two-way communication strategies for relationship building and increased support. The press agentry model for fundraising, which relies on emotion to motivate donors and uses a one-way flow of information, is the most frequently used model of fundraising. Correlation tests showed fundraising with two-way communication models enhances organization public relationships more than fundraising messages that depend on unidirectional messaging. Tyndall and Waters' research also shows that fundraisers were not inclined to use message or audience research in their work, even though most nonprofit donations come from repeat donors. To encourage repeat donations, communication practitioners should form meaningful and personable relationships with donors online through two-way conversations to get to know target audiences more intimately. The knowledge gained from online engagement can be used to improve the emotional messaging communication practitioners deploy. Furthermore, online organizational public relationships are valuable because nonprofits can inform target audiences and improve public perceptions about the organization in a social setting, which can also lead to increased giving. Emotional messaging works more effectively in social settings because it solicits increased emotional feedback, which influences the reach of social media posts. Keeping members of key publics informed on a regular basis is crucial for nonprofit organizations in maintaining relationships, according to Sisson. Furthermore, control mutuality greatly impacts the nonprofit organization-donor relationship, and nonprofit donors who participate on social media with a charitable organization showed greater perception of control mutuality than donors not affiliated with the organization on social media. Sisson's study finds that donors care about being listened to by the nonprofits they support, and that donors affiliated with a charitable organization on social media believe their opinions and suggestions are valued by the nonprofit organization. Researchers expand on previous nonprofit storytelling literature, which establishes the effectiveness of starting a story by eliciting a negative response from the viewer, such as sadness or anger, for increased fundraising support. The purpose of such messaging is to then guide the audience to create a positive feeling, such as hope or pride, by providing them the opportunity to support the nonprofit in a solution to the problem. Storytelling is a purposeful component to this type of emotional messaging for fundraising. First, digital storytelling provides an opportunity for charitable nonprofits to showcase a need for its valuable work. Second, digital storytelling gives the consumer an opportunity to play a role in the story by helping a person in need through donation to the charitable cause. Finally, the story provides different emotions through stages, leading the viewer from negative to positive feelings. Many researchers suggest this journey starts by eliciting moral outrage. The goal is to lead viewers to increased levels of positive emotions and decreased negative emotions when the messaging guides the audience to take positive action. Merchant et al. Study showed that positive feedback to donors after giving a donation intensifies positive feelings and greatly increases the chances that donors will continue to contribute again in the near future. Therefore, Merchant et al. Also suggest using negative emotional messaging to elicit donations, but to use positive emotional messaging to follow up when thanking donors. Take a moment to read this emotional fundraising message from the nonprofit Oceana. As this ad demonstrates, emotions are essential for motivation and action, and our failure to act in situations in which action is warranted can often be traced to an insufficiency of emotion. In a 2017 study, Schwartz and Lowenstein examined 5 negative emotions: anger, disgust, fear, sadness, and anxiety, and found that evoking sadness through emotional nonprofit videos significantly increases donor intentions to give financially. It should be noted, however, that these researchers found that any video eliciting one of the 5 negative emotions research resulted in increased donations, at least immediately after exposure to the stimuli, in comparison to financial giving after exposure to videos without emotional messaging. Because people are often unaware of the factors that influence their behavior, timing is fundamental when using emotional storytelling for fundraising. Communication practitioners must capitalize on the effects of negative emotional messaging by directly calling the viewer to action post-message by providing a link with an opportunity to donate at the end of the video or emotional message. Alternatively, in a different research study on the efficacy of shock advertising, Cockrell and Parsonage found only a relatively limited range of emotions had any significant impact on behavioral intentions to donate. The effect of 16 emotional message types were tested on different pro-social behaviors, including fear, compassion, hope, relief, pride, shock, interest, anger, surprise, regret, shame, guilt, happiness, sadness, and joy. Cockrell and Parsonage rely on the Oxford English Dictionary to define shock as a feeling of disturbed surprise resulting from a sudden upsetting event. Results showed shocking videos had a stronger emotional impact than positive videos on financial contributions. However, Cockrell and Parsonage's study results also indicated that shock is not necessarily an effective emotional tactic by itself. The three most effective emotions to encourage financial support to the nonprofit organization, combined with shock, were positive feelings of interest, compassion, and surprise, which is positive shock. Moreover, researchers reported that feelings of regret, hope, and happiness are counterproductive to fundraising efforts. Even though some positive emotions, such as interest and surprise, positively correlate with desired behavioral changes, other positive emotions act as deterrents. Cockrell and Parsonage posit that if people feel happy and joyful and have hope, they see less need to support the charitable cause or to engage with it. Expanding on the literature of positive and negative emotions for digital storytelling and fundraising, other researchers identify additional factors that influence the effectiveness of such emotional messaging. Since nonprofit organizations increasingly rely on individual donations to mitigate or eliminate social problems, communication practitioners fundraising for nonprofits need to understand target audience demographics and characteristics. Examining gender differences in responding to emotional messages, Powlin et al.'s research results showed that women tend to relate more strongly to others' benefits appeals, also known as altruistic motivation, while men often connect more to self-benefit appeals, also known as egotistical motivation. However, it's worth emphasizing that females showed higher intentions for offline and online support than males in both others' benefits and self-benefits messaging. These findings hold theoretical value consistent with past research that women tend to be more altruistic than men. Evoking empathy, the focus of others' benefits emotional appeals, is a strong predictor of intentions to support a charitable cause. However, because women are already predisposed to helping others, Powlin et al. Encourages communication practitioners to emotionally prod altruistic behavior and empathy in men through emotional hooks to encourage an increase in donations. Expanding on research studying the impact of gender on emotional messaging, researchers elaborate with other characteristics that can influence the effectiveness of emotional messaging, such as empathetic disposition and affect intensity. Empathetic disposition characterizes the likeliness of an individual to show feelings of warmth, compassion, and concern for the victim. Affect intensity refers to the level of intensity at which an individual experiences feelings. Both empathetic disposition and affect intensity can influence the effect of positive and negative emotional messaging on fundraising goals. Furthermore, regardless of gender, an individual's stress level at the time of exposure to an emotional message can also impact the effectiveness of emotional digital storytelling campaigns. Research shows individuals susceptible to feeling high stress also experience intense positive feelings as well as intensified feelings of sadness, fear, and so on. Even though individuals in this population showed an increased desire to donate, they also showed an increased likelihood to establish negative attitudes towards the advertisement. Communication practitioners should be cautious of males and females prone to high stress because it leads to avoidance attitudes, which can be counterproductive for long-term fundraising. Since emotional messaging can arouse differing reactions and undesired consequences from viewers, communication practitioners should understand target audiences and segment messages based on audience demographics and motives. Communication practitioners can utilize social and digital media to learn about key audiences and their altruistic motivations for targeted emotional fundraising campaign results. Facebook data insights and other digital measurement tools, such as UTM codes, provide an opportunity for fundraisers to see what content facilitates desired outcomes. For best practices, nonprofit fundraisers should pre-test emotional messages on social media and gather analytic data to support the use of stories that elicit the most positive feedback. Because timing is an essential component to emotional storytelling, fundraisers must specifically call viewers to action directly after the negative emotional message for optimal results. It is also worthwhile for nonprofits to thank donors with a positive emotional message of gratitude, which research shows greatly increases the opportunity for repeat donations. Ultimately, when a nonprofit implements ongoing digital storytelling and message testing, the nonprofit increases transparency and accountability for the organization's work, which has a positive impact on organization public relationships and fundraising goals. For optimized fundraising strategies, further research is needed to clarify the impact of positive and negative emotional messaging on fundraising goals. Emotions like shock, sadness, hope, and happiness specifically warrant extended research to identify the impact of these emotions on pro-social behaviors. In conclusion, social and digital media provide effective channels and tools for charitable nonprofit fundraisers to communicate with key publics, as well as to share compelling digital photography, videos, and multimedia graphics successfully for emotional fundraising campaigns. Based on the combined findings in this research paper, positive and negative emotional appeals can increase intentions to donate. While individual characteristics that reflect significant changes on donations, such as high empathy and affect intensity, can be found in both males and females, research shows that both sexes can be persuaded by emotional hooks to encourage increased giving. Emotional messages for fundraising should encourage sadness, compassion, surprise, and shock, but not hope, happiness, and regret. When publishing emotional messages online, fundraisers should be cognizant of the different impacts emotional messages have for target audiences and demographics. If organizations facilitate negative emotional messaging without researching target audiences and pre-testing messages, it could result in a negative perception of the organization and cause avoidance attitudes. Alternatively, if an organization implements positive emotional messaging such as hope and happiness, it could have undesired effects on fundraising outcomes. Thus, social media engagement through emotional digital storytelling helps nonprofit organizations learn about audiences and test emotional messaging for increased fundraising outcomes. Thank you for your attention. This marks the end of my presentation. References from research included in this presentation can be found on the next slide.